For those of you who don't know, the Crisis on Infinite Earths animated movie just dropped a few days ago, and I actually took some time to watch it in the server with the Theromax Corps, and I actually thought it was really good for a part 1. And we'll actually get both parts 2 and 3 later on in this year, and I'm actually pretty hyped for it. But after watching it a variety of times, I actually found many discrepancies between the original version of the Crisis on Infinite Earths from the comic book. And after a short discussion with the crew itself, a few questions were asked, like, how many differences are there between the two? Today, let's find out. What's up guys, it's me Lumos Theromax, and today we break down the differences between the animated and comic book versions of the Crisis on Infinite Earths event. And be sure to like and subscribe down low, and if you're really interested, consider becoming a member, as those are the homies who help fund me and help me decide what content comes out next. So if you want to join that crew, big W's. But now let's get straight into the content, because I want to talk about this, guys. Difference 1. So this is something that's going to span out past just even topic 1, but it's a much broader topic that I think needs to be addressed. The timeline in this part 1 of Infinite Crisis in this animated cartoon is dramatically different than how things actually occur in chronological order from the comic book version. And here's why. I'll give just a few examples, and then like the larger examples, I'll branch off into their own separate kind of arguments, okay? So to give you guys a general idea how we know that this may be an adaptation to the comic, but is definitely not literal, is we have all sorts of different events happening at different times. Take for example, like Barry Allen, the Flash's tragic fate, happening in the first third of the story, when I think it's like issue 8 or so, whenever Barry runs himself to death in the comics. And that's just one example out of a ton, okay? Like the shadow demons of the Anti-Monitor never attack the cosmic tuning forks during this, nor do they attack everybody on the Monitor ship when they were first all summoned together. So like these are the Anti-Monitor's go-to minions, and that was something we just entirely missed out on in general. But you think, well, maybe it's just the order of events. Well, I mean, characters' origins were changed. Like Iris is now African American in this run, and Harbinger, for some reason, who's like one of the main characters in terms of the Monitor's forces, was just completely rewritten to be some version of Supergirl. I'm pretty sure they call her Kara Zor-El in it. So it was very odd in my opinion. That would also explain why she knew those Legion of Superheroes goons. But clearly, there was a lot of changes, and I think the biggest one that actually occurred was the heroes had all worked together to essentially create prep time to manage to stop the worlds from being destroyed by the Anti-Monitor's antimatter wave in this, which is pretty wild because that was definitely not the case. Everything was just completely eliminated as time went on, and it was basically the Monitor bailing people out, which kind of got us there. But there's a lot of different major changes. I think one of the first and foremost that I thought was odd is actually our next one though. Problem 2. Okay, we had some pretty major changes to the Justice League's origins. In this animated version of the Justice League from Earth 1, it has a roster of like Batman, Superman, Martian Manhunter, The Flash, as well as like Green Arrow and Vixen. And later on, John Stewart becomes like a very prominent member of the crew as Green Lantern. This is nowhere near the same as the original founding members of the Justice League inside the comics. Like we're a long shot away, as they featured not Vixen or Green Arrow, but Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Hal Jordan. And since I brought up the GOAT Hal Jordan, let's actually talk the changes with that guy, because boy were they different. Issue number 3, the Hal Jordan changes. So the Hal Jordan disrespect inside this video was low-key pretty mad, okay? It was pretty mad. First off, they don't make Hal Jordan a founding Justice League member, but he is asked to be in the show. So like we know Hal does exist inside this version or this continuity. But like basically he's just an asshole shill for the Guardians and says, I can only be on one team, the Green Lantern Corps, and tells him to F off.
You're kidding, right? I'm already on a team. It's called the Green Lantern Corps. I'll pass.
It was like mind-blowing to disrespect the Hal in this, but it was pretty crazy. This version of Hal is nothing like the version of Hal Jordan from any of the comic book series that I've read. He's just kind of a douche, to be honest. And I know the ongoing meme is Lanterns are always that way, but like, whoa, it was like top tier douchery in this one.
What a jerk. That guy is the worst.
It's also important to note that like Hal Jordan inside the original Crisis on Infinite Earths event was effectively absent for the majority of it. He was on his own adventures and got caught up in the middle of things and was thrown outside of reality. It's a long story, but Jon Stewart during this event was basically chosen to be the Green Lantern in his place as the Monitor grabbed him instead, which I thought was a little bit odd. But he was given a ring just before this, and even Guy Gardner winds up getting a ring during this event after the Anti-Monitor nukes the rest of the Guardians and stuff. So, dope Green Lantern lore out in the middle of nowhere. Issue number 4. They really are pushing the Flash in this. They really make him seem like he's kind of the only reason the Justice League ever got together, and is just superior to pretty much everyone else, both in terms of his morals as well as in terms of his power. I think Barry is what I would consider the main character inside the cartoon show for sure, but they kill him off much faster than they do in the original Crisis on Infinite Earths comic book event, as I had referenced earlier. It didn't feel as bad as if, like his death didn't feel like it had as much impact as it did in the comics, because it didn't feel like his death was as significant, because Barry died saving the last remaining Earths inside the original event, and in this he just saved pretty much all the ones that hadn't already been devoured. So that was kind of unfortunate in terms of a change of him, but definitely a step into the main character role for Barry during this movie, which I thought was odd. Issue number 5. So the Monitor changes. It seems that this Monitor is pretty lore accurate for the most part. He mentions this race of other Monitors, which I'm assuming is in reference to the Anti-Monitor, which should be foreshadowing obviously to him rolling up in part 2 down the way. However, this version of the Monitor seemingly isn't aware of the Anti-Monitor being behind absolutely everything inside this event, like he was in the comic book version. Like, in the comic book version, clearly he was aware as they had engaged each other before. I don't think this version of the Monitor is as intelligent as his comic book counterpart, either, as that version of the Monitor had plans within plans within plans within plans, but who knows? Maybe we just haven't necessarily seen that for this version of the Monitor yet, as we haven't even gotten to some of the spicier stuff with him down the way, or at least as spicy as it gets for the Monitor. The reason why I say all this is because he kind of relied on the prep time of the superheroes, when in the comic books that guy could just kind of wave his hands and pretty much do anything besides stop the antimatter wave. Like, it was like genuinely pretty wild. At one point in time, he beam struggled with the Anti-Monitor for 1,000,000 years across 2 separate sides of reality, the positive matter existence versus the antimatter existence. So like, he's definitely a different guy in terms of intellect and just raw power inside the comics. In the movie, he kind of had the heroes build the cosmic tuning forks for him, which was kind of weird, when he just kind of had those in all those realities inside the comics. It's pretty weird. But I mean, it is what it is. And speaking of those heroes that actually rolled up to build those cosmic tuning forks, issue number 6. Golden Age Superman / like Earth 2 Superman changes. Okay, so this is probably one of the biggest changes, I would say, to a character in general, outside of just like shifting characters around that don't get a lot of screen time. Earth 2 Superman is very different. They say he looks older. He does not look older. He doesn't even have the gray stripe going on. So he doesn't look anywhere near as old as his comic book counterpart by a long shot. Unfortunately, Earth 2 Superman's Lois Lane is just dead. And keep in mind, that's an incredibly important plot line to follow up on in later Crisis events with Infinite Crisis. So Lois Lane being dead is pretty wild. And for some strange reason, he winds up with Wonder Woman afterwards. So like, he's just actively like banging Wonder Woman. Well, I guess not on screen during the movie. Clearly they were like in a relationship. So very big changes for Earth 2 Superman. I think he is a very different character. And honestly, he's kind of a Superman who lives in fear, if you ask me, the way he describes death and everything along those lines with Lois Lane. So kind of unfortunate, but I mean, it is what it is. Issue number 7. So there was an incredibly odd focus on Amazo inside the animated version of this movie. It's very weird how much they chose to focus on him, considering I don't even think Amazo was a character who showed up in the entire Crisis on Infinite Earths event. Like, if he did, it was such a minor role, I genuinely don't even remember it. So there was a lot of weird focus, and don't get me wrong, it was super funny watching him like style on Superman left and right. And speaking of which, we're kind of going back to that like flash glazing, because like only he could really deal with him. And then later on, they wind up working together in the, like, one of the craziest scenes ever, where he hooks up the cosmic tuning fork and powers all of the cosmic tuning, or the cosmic treadmill hooks them up to the cosmic tuning forks of all of the multiverse, and together they basically empower them to save all the worlds from the antimatter wave. So like he was like a mainstay character here with the Flash, and has a good character arc over the movie. It was just an odd amount of focus that came directly on him. And speaking of odd amounts of focus and characters being thrown in places they shouldn't have been, let's talk number 8. Issue number 8. Okay, so this one bothers me, I think, more than anything else on the list. You know, earlier I said, hey, this is probably the biggest change whenever it comes to Superman's character. This is definitely tied with it, or maybe even just behind it. Okay, so we just entirely replaced one of the main characters of the Crisis on Infinite Earths event with Constantine, because Constantine's British and popular. This is something that drives me absolutely insane. Constantine was virtually entirely absent from the entire Crisis on Infinite Earths event. Even at the end, when all the mages show up to amp the Spectre for his final showdown with the Anti-Monitor, Constantine was not in that bunch. I literally had to go look to make sure. Like that, it's absolutely crazy. And the worst part is he replaces Pariah during this event. Pariah was the man who unleashed the Anti-Monitor on all of reality via an antimatter weapon he created. Basically, this guy was trying to pull a Krona and witness the origins of all of creation, but they just chose not to do that for some reason. And Pariah was like a pivotal character throughout the entire thing. He even opened a doorway into the antimatter universe himself. Like, he's a really important figure, not just in that event, but for years to come in terms of what he offered to the heroes, because he was kind of like a multiversal alarm character who just teleported to where things were shitty. So definitely odd to see Constantine show up and try to be doing what he was doing via magic, but chances are Constantine is taking up this role in the animated version because he had such a significant role in the prior movies leading up to this, in terms of like the Man of Tomorrowverse or the Tomorrowverse or whatever the specific iteration of everything is. It's super unfortunate. I hated the change, but god damn it, Constantine is just a popular. God, why do y'all like Constantine, dude? Issue number 9. So another major change in a character's personality here, that I think was too big to just mention kind of offhand. Yo, the Spectre changes.
Yet you tried anyway. You hoped.
Perhaps I did.
Interesting. It is said you cannot have hope without faith.
The Spectre seems like a genuinely good person. Almost angelic, like he had never really fallen from grace like his comic book counterpart had. And Jim Corrigan, especially the person, let alone Jim Corrigan the Spectre, in this era, is not that guy, okay? He is not the good guy that they try to present inside this. He was violent and vengeful, hence being the whole I'm the vengeance of God kind of persona. But this is definitely not the man of wild faith that he's presented as inside this movie. Like, take for example when the Spectre shows up and he's just talking to the Monitor for some reason, like they're homies, and he chooses not to get involved, like, at all, for some reason. Okay, the Spectre in the original comics chose not to get involved until afterwards because he's vengeance driven. Okay, and so something that blows my mind is that he just kind of rolls up and is chilling for some reason. In the comics, like, the antimatter universe was so messed up that, like, magicians just can't go there. They can just negs all magic. In this era, at least. So, like, there was reasons why the Spectre didn't get involved, at least stated inside the comics, but clearly not inside this one. And I hate seeing my homie Jim Corrigan get disrespected the way he was in this, bro. He is not that guy. Issue number 10. So, the absence of villains inside this entire run was also pretty suspect in my eyes. Lex Luthor and Psycho Pirate are slightly featured inside the animated movie, but that's pretty much it in terms of villains, because we legitimately don't see any of the rest of them. In the comic book run, when the Monitor had originally gathered all of the heroes together, it wasn't just heroes and 2 villains. No, it was a weird amount of people just kind of sprinkled, whether they were good or bad. You had Lex Luthor, who was there, Psycho Pirate was there, you had Brainiac, and you had the entire Legion of Doom that was featured pretty prominently throughout the entire thing. In fact, there was an entire arc towards the end of the run where the Legion of Doom essentially puts together their own plan to stop the crisis on Infinite Earths by going back in time, something that apparently was impossible during the animated run for some reason. Essentially they went back in time to stop Krona from ever having visited the dawn of existence, because they thought by doing so they could stop the Anti-Monitor from ever being rebirthed back into creation. So we just missed out on all of that. The Spectre coming across them and telling them don't get involved or I'll fuck you up. We just missed out on all of that whenever it comes to the Legion of Doom. And to make things even crazier, not only did they get soloed by Krona and the Guardians of the Universe back at the dawns of existence, that plan was horrible because the Guardians fucked them up in their primes. But the Anti-Monitor is entirely absent from this entire first video, which, to be fair, is somewhat legitimate, because in the original franchise all you really saw was him from the shadows manipulating things. You just saw his silhouette and he'd be talking to Psycho Pirate or monologuing to himself about events that were happening, and him scheming to kind of meme Harbinger. So we just miss out on that entirely. It seems that nobody knew this is the Anti-Monitor doing this. He is entirely absent from this, which is a very big change towards the beginning. But it is what it is. Clearly he did create the Anti-Monitor wave. It didn't come from nowhere, and we'll get to him in parts 2 and 3 most likely as a focal point. So despite everything that went on inside it, I'm a person who can separate what happened in the comics from a property's unique storyline. Okay, and I can grade them accordingly. I think it's a great show, but it's definitely not accurate to the original series. They followed the same general guideline of an antimatter wave effectively wiping out the multiverse, except for not really, because most of it survived. But the same general premise occurs for, I believe it's the first 2 or 3 issues. That's kind of essentially what we covered in between here and there. But so far, I would say the ultimate DC story being transcribed inside of an animated show. It's not the end of the world in terms of its inaccuracies, but I definitely think its quality will increase or decrease based on essentially how good the next few movies are following up to this one. Because if those ones are ass, it'll definitely impact how good this one was for sure. But be sure to like and subscribe down low. And consider becoming a member, man. I've got plenty of members who are total homies. They support me 24/7, and they help me decide and make additional content. And why don't you guys tell me what you thought was the biggest misinterpretation, or maybe the biggest flop that happened inside this animated movie that you think was not accurate to the original story, or maybe it's something that you think should have been changed for the better. Because there were some things I noticed they changed in here where I was like, but why? The original was 8,000 times better. If you were going to change it, why wouldn't you have done this instead? Take for example, the whole focus on Amazo. I thought they were gonna have Amazo learn to absorb antimatter. I thought that was the whole meme with them focusing on it so much, but then we just forgot about that. So it is what it is. But there was a bunch of changes, and I really hope that we'll get more and see more as time goes on. But I will say they did the Crime Syndicate justice on this one for sure. 100 likes or more, and I'll do a full review. Later, Lanterns.
Corrupting and creating events that affect the entire verse was the only way she theorized to decimate her source wall curse, and so she whispered madness to her child, the Anti-Monitor, driving him towards his revenge on his brother, the Monitor. A crisis on Infinite Earths is what he decided to grant, but her children were